The next thing we want to do in our drawing here is add the interior partitions, or the interior walls as they're often referred to. So if we zoom in on our drawing here, you can see we've got the exterior, but we need to start adding things like these interior partitions to divide up the different rooms into the laboratory, the open office, the break room, etc. So we've got the exterior here, and you'll see these little boxes that go across our interior partitions with a letter and a number. These are actually the callouts for the different partition types. And if you go look at the notes over here on this drawing, and again, this is drawing A01-101. If you go look at the notes, it says that for the partition types, we need to go open up sheet A-501. So I've already got that loaded. I'm going to open it up here, and we'll take a look. And we've got a couple partition types here that are visible. We've got A1, which actually mounts directly to the exterior wall, so you can see the face of the exterior wall is right here. So that's a little bit different. And then in various places we've got, wall type B1 or C1. So C1's insulated. But what we have here is a metal stud that is spaced at 16 inches, 1 foot 4 inches. And that's just the spacing between studs. The overall width, when we're looking at the wall, is 3 5/8 for this particular stud, and that's pretty common. And then there is gypsum wallboard on both sides, and there's a note on this drawing that says the gypsum wallboard is 5/8 of an inch. So if we wanted to calculate the overall thickness here, we've got 5/8 plus 3 5/8 plus 5/8, and if you add all that up, it's 4 7/8 of an inch. So this interior wall type C1 is just under 5 inches from face of drywall to face of drywall that you would see. The B1 wall type is exactly the same, except you just don't insulate between the studs. Now this 1 foot 4 inches may confuse people if you're not familiar with stud construction, but what you have is, in a particular wall, this just shows an opening. You've got a bottom plate, and then these would be your studs, and these would be 16 inches on center. And in this picture, they look like they're just 2x4s, which is pretty common for residential construction here. But you've got a stud, and these are 1 foot 4 inches apart. So that's that center line spacing. This is just a more detailed view of some different connections here. And then if we go look at our drawing, we've got a wall type A1, which actually mounts directly to the CMU here, and those studs are laid in this orientation to get that 1 5/8 inch measurement. So that's where that stud width comes from. And then you've got drywall or gypsum board on one side, whereas here we've got a wall type B1 or C1 where we've got studs 16 inches on center, but the overall width of these is only 3 5/8. And then if you add the 5/8 and 5/8 for the gypsum, you get an overall thickness of 4 7/8. So when we go to start drawing these things, we're going to need to know these thicknesses. So B1 and C1 are 4 7/8, and then A1 is 1 5/8 plus 5/8, which ends up being 2 1/4 inches. So when we go back to our floor plan here, anywhere we see a wall type A1, that means we need to have an offset of 2 1/4 inches to get to the finished face of our rooms. And it's important because it says all interior dimensions are to the face of the gypsum wallboard. So if we're going to start drawing these interior partitions, the first thing we really need is this wall type A1, and that goes around the entire exterior wall. So a really easy way to do that is to come back to our drawing, do a zoom extent, and I'm going to do an offset command. So offset of 2.25 inches. Another way to type that in is 2 1/4 inch. Actually, if you did it without reducing, it'd be 2 2/8, and it'll take it either way. So I'll click on the inside face and go to the inside. And just real quick, DIST, just to verify this measurement before we continue. So 2 1/4. So that's my wall type A1, and that shows up everywhere. And now what I can do is start actually outfitting this laboratory here. So we can see that this is 10 feet from drywall to drywall, or gypsum board to gypsum board here. And then we've got a C1, which we already know is 4 7/8. So I'm going to work on this room, so it's 10 foot by 22 foot. Coming back here, I'm going to draw a temporary line from my gypsum board. Oops, I need it to be straight. So endpoint straight up, offset 10 feet. Send that over. I'm going to create another line over here and go this way and offset 22 feet, which are the measurements of our laboratory. And then I'm going to use the extend command and extend this line down and extend that line over. Alright, so that is the laboratory. I do not need this line extending out, so I use trim TR, use this as my cutting object, get rid of that line, and then these were just temporary, so I can delete these away. Actually, that one needs trimmed as well. Alright, so there is the outline of my laboratory. So let me show these things side by side. So I've got my laboratory, I got my 10-foot dimension, I got my 22-foot dimension, and the next thing is to offset these for the interior partition, which is that 4 7/8 of an inch. So coming over here, I'm going to go to the offset O, and the distance is 4-7/8 inches. So that's just under 5 inches. I'm going to click on my object, go to the left, click on my object, go down, and then I'm going to polish up this area here. So trim, get rid of that middle part. So what I have now is my laboratory and my private office. I've got this wall is a B1, but it's just not insulated, and a C1 over here. This break room is 10 foot off, and then we could start working on the men's restroom over here as well. So you'll notice on some of these dimensions they've got a plus or minus on here. We want to try to avoid these when adding the features to our object. You can see we've got 10 foot over on this side, we've got our wall thickness. If we go all the way over to the other, we've got a measurement, a wall thickness, and a measurement. So we don't really need this dimension, and this is just approximate, which is why they added that plus minus symbol. So when you're adding the interior partitions, do not use these to draw your objects, otherwise your measurements will be slightly off. So here's another one. I think there's one down here in the private office. So that's what those mean. Those are approximate, so do not use those to place your walls. You can find other measurements to start placing those walls. So when you're done with this, you should have all of the interior walls drawn. Notice here this is a B2, it's a bit thicker. So if we go back to our partition types, we'd have a B2 where we've just got a 6-inch stud with 5/8 and 5/8, so that would end up being 7 1/4 for the B2 wall type. There are a few dimensions missing in this bathroom, and it gets pretty crowded in here, which is why they have a different drawing for that. And it's actually called the enlarged plans here. So A01-401 has an entire drawing just for this bathroom here, and this gives you a few more dimensions, like the dimension of this bathroom stall. It's 5 foot. This is already called out as a wall type B1, I believe, and then the shower stall is 5 foot. It's 2 foot wall here, and I think there's another measurement here. It's kind of covered up, but this is 3 feet as well. So this will allow you to locate your walls properly. That's 5 foot 6 inches, so you can draw all these walls in the correct location. We had to go to an enlarged plan because there's a whole lot of detail, and this drawing is actually showing bubble callouts here for the different scheduled items, and you can see all these items down here. So with that, you should be able to finish up the interior partitions, and then we can start working on cutouts for windows and doors and the placement of those objects.